The last couple of weeks have been insane for the rap genre. In 2024, it was looking pretty dry until now. Kendrick and Drake have been going at each other with diss tracks. If you have no idea what's going on or don't follow rap, I'm here to briefly explain it, to catch you up, and give my thoughts on what's going to happen next. Really quickly, if you don't know what a diss track is, it's basically a song dedicated to disrespecting a person or multiple people. The whole beef between Drake and Kendrick began with one of the most popular songs from Drake's 11th studio album, For All the Dogs, called First Person Shooter. This song featured J. Cole, a famous rapper, and in verse 2, J. Cole says, "Is it K. Dot, is it Aubrey, or me? We the big three." Which means he thinks himself, Drake, and Kendrick are the biggest three rappers right now and are the greatest of all time. This song was released on October 6th, 2023. Around 5 months later, Metro Boomin, a well-known producer for big artists like The Weeknd, released an album called We Don't Trust You. One song stood out from the rest on this album called Like That. The song featured Future and Kendrick, where on verse 2 of the song, Kendrick references what J. Cole said and goes on to say how he isn't part of the big three and it's just himself. Kendrick also addresses how he doesn't like the sneak dissing that J. Cole did, which basically means dissing someone without actually being direct. Around 2 weeks after this, J. Cole dropped a diss called 7 Minute Drill, where he essentially just dissed Kendrick, saying how his albums are boring and discrediting his work. 2 days after he released that song, J. Cole apologized for making that song and completely removed it from all streaming platforms. He also mentioned how it was the corniest thing he'd ever done in his career. This decision from J. Cole would prove to be a very smart and useful move in the future, as no one could have predicted how much things would heat up in the next week or so. 1 week had passed from the 7 Minute Drill track, and on April 19th, Drake dropped a diss called Push Ups, where he essentially just called Kendrick short, made fun of his shoe size, and how Kendrick has to give 50% of his profits from music to his manager. Drake also says how he feels like this whole beef is just a big 20v1, since a lot of rappers were jumping on him and dissing, even having The Weeknd dissing him on a track, All To Myself, which released only 4 days before Push Ups. Drake also goes after J. Cole on the track, saying how he thinks Kendrick's diss on Like That was weak, and even disses his fiance. Then Drake drops a track called Tailor Made Diss, which was a really odd one since it had AI generated voices of rappers, Tupac and Snoop Dogg. Having these voices caused Drake to be threatened with a lawsuit against him since it was in violation of Tupac's rights to use his voice without consent. Drake then took down the diss from all streaming platforms and tried to move on. On April 30th, on a random Tuesday, Kendrick dropped a track called Euphoria. This was the first diss of many that really sparked the beef. It was like he was throwing more wood onto the fire. This diss was a lot more brutal than his diss on the track Like That. There are so many layers to this song and a lot of the bars go over people's heads. In the diss, Kendrick directly focuses on Drake and goes over many things. He says he hates the way Drake talks, walks, and dresses. He hates the women Drake surrounds himself with. He even takes shots at Drake's insecurities about how he's trying to prove how black he is to everyone. He also says how he needs to stop acting tough and go back to his more melodic songs like Hotline Bling. Kendrick then calls Drake out for having ghostwriters, and Kendrick says how it's a 1v20 if he has to battle his ghostwriters as well, but has no problem doing that. This diss was definitely more brutal than Drake's, and it came out so unexpectedly. Shortly after that, Kendrick dropped a track called 616 in LA, which served like a warning diss for Drake, almost as if Kendrick was saying that if Drake went any further, he was gonna get destroyed. On May 3rd, Drake dropped Family Matters, which to be honest went harder than his previous song Push Ups, where Drake basically accused Kendrick of being a wife beater towards his fiance. Again, Drake didn't just stick to Kendrick like he should have, he also went after The Weeknd and more people. Overall, it wasn't actually a bad diss and was better than people were anticipating, and fans were waiting for Kendrick to respond. Not even an hour after Drake dropped that diss, Kendrick responded with a track called Meet the Grahams. This meant that Kendrick had plenty of ammunition and baited Drake to drop something just so he could drop it right after and destroy him, making Drake think he had a bit of leverage for only an hour. This diss was even more brutal than Euphoria. It's essentially a song in the style of writing a letter, and the people who were receiving this letter were members of Drake's family, which is why it's titled Meet the Grahams, which is his family's last name. Kendrick starts the diss by talking to Drake's son, called Adonis, where he apologized that Drake was his father, implying that he knows that he's never around and doesn't care about anything but his music and would rather pop pills. Kendrick almost acts like a second father by trying to teach Adonis things about life, since his real father would wouldn't, and says to listen to this song when he's 18 to properly understand it. He then moves on to Drake's mum, Sandra, briefly, and then to his father, Dennis. He says how he gave birth to a horrible person, being Drake, and how he thinks Drake should die. Kendrick also exposes how Drake keeps sex offenders on his music label OVO and accuses him of being a predator. He also says how people like him leak videos of themselves to further push their agendas, referencing how an explicit video of him leaked not too long ago. One big thing that Kendrick exposes is Drake's hidden daughter, and says how she doesn't deserve a father like Drake, who is neglecting her and would rather be with multiple women partying. But whether this is true is not 100% confirmed. The ending line to the song hits pretty hard, telling Drake that this isn't just a rap battle, it's a long life battle with himself. 24 hours later, Kendrick dropped another diss called Not Like Us, which to this day is his most popular diss so far. This one was absolutely insane. Even the cover art for the diss was wild, being a picture of Drake's mansion on Google Maps with sex offender pinpoints that are red, meaning that they are repeated offenders. In this diss, Kendrick doubles down on Drake being a predator, saying in one of the bars, "Certified lover boy, certified pedophile," which is in reference to Drake's album, Certified Lover Boy. One of the most memorable lines from the diss was trying to strike a chord and it's probably A minor, which of course is a double entendre, referencing the musical chord A minor and the age of people under 18 categorized as minors, which he's being accused of liking. One of the reasons Kendrick claims this is because of an old clip of Drake on stage with a 17-year-old, and after knowing her age, he kisses her. The diss has a lot more to it, but I won't go into too much detail, and if you really want to know every single thing about it, there's plenty of breakdowns on YouTube. On May 6th, Drake attempted to respond by releasing a diss called The Heart Part 6, which is in reference to Kendrick's The Heart series of songs, with the last one being The Heart Part 5 that Kendrick released. In the diss, Drake basically goes over how he tricked Kendrick by feeding his managers false information. For example, the thing about the secret daughter, which of course could be Drake just trying to cover himself up and backtrack. He also addresses Kendrick's allegations by saying that if he really was one, he'd have been locked up by now, which is a pretty weak argument since there are many people like Dan Schneider who are still free. Drake also included an outro on the track where he started talking instead of rapping and said how this whole rap beef was a good exercise and how Kendrick would have been a worthy competitor if Drake was actually a predator. Some people even said that that outro was the cringiest thing Drake's ever done. Overall, it was a pretty mid diss and not that great of a response. So that's basically where we're up to so far. There are more details, but this is just like a brief explanation. I think Kendrick will probably drop a couple more tracks. Drake also might, but at this point it's pretty much over and there's not much more Drake can do to try and get back on top. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. Let me know what you think.